My name is Maya, and I just turned 28. The house I live in was left to me by my grandfather, a place filled with cherished memories and hard work. When I was only 9 years old, my mother remarried and suddenly decided I should live with my grandparents. She promised it would be temporary, but days turned into years. Everything was peaceful until 19 years later, when Mum showed up with her husband and stepson demanding my house. The shock of seeing them after all this time was nothing compared to their entitlement. If you are watching this, let me know where you are from in the comments, and please subscribe to hear my story of betrayal, family secrets, and how I fought for what was rightfully mine. Growing up, it was just my mum and me. Those first 8 years were filled with simple joys despite our modest means. Mum worked as a waitress during the day and took night shifts at a convenience store. She was always tired, but never failed to tuck me in with a bedtime story. I learnt to be independent early on, making my own lunch for school and helping with laundry. Mum would kiss the top of my head and call me her little grown-up. When I was 8, everything changed. Mum came home one day bubbling with excitement about a man she had met while catering a corporate event. His name was James Thompson, an account executive with a winning smile and expensive suit. The first time I met James, he brought me a stuffed unicorn with a purple mane. Something about his smile didn't quite reach his eyes, but Mum looked so happy I pushed aside my unease. Mum laughed at his jokes in a way I had never heard before, high-pitched and girlish. James had a son named Tyler, who was 11. During our first meeting, he bragged about his new gaming system and complained when I touched his action figures. But whenever Mum or James looked over, he would flash a perfect smile and offer to let me play. Within 3 months, James was practically living at our apartment. Mum transformed before my eyes, buying new clothes and spending hours applying makeup. Our special Saturday morning pancake tradition was replaced with brunches at restaurants where I was told to be on my best behaviour. The more time passed, the less Mum seemed to see me, her eyes always seeking James' approval instead. Their wedding happened just 6 months after they met. I was the flower girl in an itchy dress that Tyler said made me look like a baby. The whole day, Mum floated around, like a stranger, barely noticing when I spilled juice on my dress and cried in the bathroom. After the honeymoon, we moved into James' house in the suburbs. It had 4 bedrooms, but somehow I ended up in the smallest one next to the laundry room. Tyler got the large bedroom with the bay window and his own bathroom. When I asked why, Mum just said that Tyler had been there first and needed his space. The first few weeks were a parade of new rules. No running in the house, no eating in the living room, no interrupting when adults are talking, which seemed to be all the time. My toys had to stay in my room while Tyler's could be everywhere. When I asked Mum about the unfairness, she would say we needed to adjust and make James happy in his home. One night, I got up for a glass of water and heard James and Mum arguing in the kitchen. His voice was low and intense. "She needs to learn some discipline, Susan." She left her backpack in the hallway again. "My house, my rules. James, she's trying. She's just a child. Tyler never behaves this way. Maybe your parenting is the problem." I froze in the hallway, heart pounding. Mum had never let anyone criticize her parenting before. "Maybe you're right," she whispered, and something inside me crumbled. The next morning, Mum and James sat me down for a talk. Their faces were serious, and Mum kept fidgeting with her wedding ring. "Maya, sweetie," Mum began. "Grandma and Grandpa miss you so much." I nodded, confused. We had visited my grandparents' farm a few times a year, 3 hours away in rural Connecticut. "We're thinking you might enjoy staying with them for a little while," James said with a smile that seemed relieved. "They have all that fresh air and space to play." "What do you mean?" I asked, looking at Mum. A knot formed in my stomach. "Just for a little bit, honey," Mum said, not meeting my eyes, "until we get the house renovated. There's going to be dust and noise. You'll be much happier with Grandma and Grandpa." "But what about school? My friends?" I could feel tears welling up. "You'll go to school near Grandma's," Mum explained. "It will be an adventure." The next day my bags were packed. Tyler smirked as he helped James load them into the car. As we drove away, I watched him happily bouncing on his trampoline in the backyard, the one I was never allowed to use unsupervised. The drive to my grandparents' farm was mostly silent. Mum kept the radio loud and talked about all the fun I would have. I pretended to sleep so I wouldn't have to respond. When we arrived, Grandma Susan hugged me tight while Grandpa William took my bags. Their farmhouse was small but warm with handmade quilts and the smell of fresh baked bread. "It's not for long," Maya, Mum promised as she prepared to leave. "Just until the renovations are done. I'll call you every day." As her car disappeared down the gravel driveway, Grandma put her arm around my shoulders. "Let's get you settled, sweetie," she said kindly. I was trying hard not to cry. Looking up at the old farmhouse, I had no idea it would become my real home, or that it would take almost 2 decades before I saw my mother again. The first night at my grandparents' farm, I cried myself to sleep. Grandma Susan sat on the edge of the bed, gently stroking my hair until I drifted off. The bedroom they had prepared for me was simple but cozy, with a handmade quilt and curtains with tiny yellow flowers. It smelled like lavender and old wood, so different from my room at home, with its plastic furniture and popcorn ceiling. School was the hardest adjustment. Millfield Elementary was tiny compared to my school in the suburbs. On my first day, the kids stared at me like I was an exotic animal. During recess, I sat alone on a bench watching the other children play games. They all seemed to know the rules too already. Mum called that first night as promised. She asked about school and if I was eating enough. I told her I missed her and asked when the renovations would be done. There was a pause on the line. "These things take time, sweetie, but we're working on it. James says maybe by Christmas you'll be home." I clung to that promise, marking off days on a calendar Grandpa gave me. 62 days until Christmas. 61. 60. While my social life at school remained lonely, life at the farm began to find a rhythm. Grandpa William was a man of few words but infinite patience. He woke at 5 each morning, and by the time I came downstairs for breakfast, he'd already fed the chickens and worked in his vegetable garden. One Saturday morning, I wandered outside in my pajamas and found him fixing a broken fence post. "Want to learn how?" he asked. It was the longest sentence he'd said to me since I arrived. That morning, he taught me how to measure twice and cut once, how to hold a hammer properly, and the satisfaction of driving a nail in straight. My small hands struggled with the tools, but Grandpa never rushed me or took over. By lunchtime, we had fixed 3 fence posts together, and I felt a new kind of pride. Grandma was the storyteller of the family. In the evenings, she would brush my hair and tell me about her childhood on the very same farm, about my mother as a little girl, about the generations of our family who had lived on this land. Sometimes she would show me old photos in albums bound with cracked leather, pointing out faces that shared my eyes or smile. As October turned to November, Mum's calls became less frequent. When she did call, the conversations were shorter, filled with vague updates about renovations being delayed. "How's Tyler?" I would ask. "Oh, he's fine. Busy with soccer and his new friends." She would quickly change the subject. By Thanksgiving, I had made one friend at school. Amanda lived on a neighbouring farm and understood what it was like to be different. She had been raised by her grandmother since she was a toddler. "My mum lives in California," she told me matter-of-factly as we walked home from the bus stop. "She sends birthday cards sometimes." I was shocked by how casually she stated this fact of abandonment, but also comforted that someone else understood. Mum called the night before Thanksgiving to tell me they wouldn't be able to come get me for the holiday. "The contractors are still working and the house is a mess," she explained. "But we'll make it up at Christmas, I promise. We'll pick you up and have a real family holiday." I hung up the phone and found Grandma in the kitchen, up to her elbows in pie dough. "They're not coming," I said, fighting tears. Grandma wiped her hands on her apron and pulled me into a flour-dusted hug. "Then we'll have our own special Thanksgiving," she declared. "You can help me make the pies." That Thanksgiving, I learnt to crimp pie crust edges and stir cranberry sauce. We ate turkey that Grandpa had raised himself and vegetables from the garden I had helped tend. It wasn't the holiday I had expected, but it was warm and real in a way that felt new. As Christmas approached, the promised reunion grew more concrete. Mum called with exciting news they would come get me on December 23rd and I would spend Christmas week at home, before returning to Grandpa's for the rest of the renovations. I was ecstatic. I made gifts for everyone, homemade jam, with Grandma's help for Mum, a whittled wooden ornament with Grandpa for Tyler, and a drawing of our house for James. I packed and repacked my bag a dozen times. On December 22nd, the phone rang during dinner. Grandpa answered, his expression growing more somber as he listened. He handed the phone to me without a word. "Maya, honey." "I'm so sorry," Mom's voice sounded strained. "James' company party ran late last night and he had a fender bender on the way home. The car's in the shop and with the holiday, they can't fix it until after Christmas." My heart sank like a stone. "But can't you take the bus or rent a car?" There was a long pause. "It's just not possible right now, Maya, but I'll send your presents and we'll do a late Christmas when you come home." I handed the phone back to Grandpa and ran to my room, slamming the door. I threw myself onto the bed and sobbed until my throat was raw. Grandma came in later with hot chocolate and sat silently with me until I calmed down. The next morning was Christmas Eve. I refused to come down for breakfast, huddled under my quilt in protest. Around noon, there was a knock at my door. Grandpa entered wearing his old coat and wool hat. "Got something to show you," he said simply. Reluctantly, I followed him outside to the barn. Inside, he led me to a stall where a small brown and white goat kid stood on wobbly legs. "Born last night," he explained. "Need someone to bottle feed her. Thought you might want the job." The tiny goat nudged my hand with her soft nose, and despite my determination to remain miserable, I felt a smile tug at my lips. "What's her name?" I asked. "Thought you'd name her," Grandpa said. I studied the goat with her patches of white on brown fur. Hope, I decided. Her name is Hope. That Christmas wasn't what I had planned, but bottle-feeding Hope every few hours gave me purpose. Grandma and Grandpa had put presents under their small tree for me, practical things like warm socks and books, but also a beautiful handmade dollhouse that Grandpa had been secretly working on for months. As weeks turned into months, the calls from Mom grew increasingly rare. The renovation excuses evolved into work complications, scheduling conflicts, and eventually just brief catch-up calls on holidays and my birthday. The calendar I had once marked so diligently found its way to the bottom of a drawer. By the time spring arrived, I had stopped asking when I would go home. The farm with its rhythms and responsibilities had become my home. I knew which chickens laid the speckled eggs, how to tell when the tomatoes were perfectly ripe, and exactly how Grandpa liked his coffee in the morning. My friendship with Amanda had deepened, and I had even made a few other friends at school. On my 11th birthday, a card arrived from Mum with $20 and a brief note wishing me happiness. The handwriting seemed rushed, and she had signed it, "Love Mum, James and Tyler," rather than writing separate messages from each of them. Grandma and Grandpa, however, made my birthday special. Grandma baked my favourite chocolate cake, and Grandpa presented me with my very own toolbox, child-sized, but filled with real tools. "Maya," he said, his weathered face serious. "These are real tools, not toys. Shows we trust you to be careful." That simple acknowledgement of trust meant more than any expensive gift could have. As I blew out my candles that evening, surrounded by my grandparents and my new friends from school, I realized something important. I was happy. Not the temporary happiness of a special occasion, but a deep-rooted contentment that came from being truly seen and valued. It took nearly 2 years from the day Mum left me at the farm for me to fully accept that I wasn't going back. By then the knowledge felt more like confirmation than revelation. The farm was my home now, and while the ache of my mother's absence never fully disappeared, it had become a familiar pain, like an old injury that flares up in cold weather. In that small rural community with my grandparents, quiet love and endless patience, I was building a new life, one fence post, one chicken egg, one math test at a time. By the time I turned 13, I had fully adapted to life on the farm. My city girl awkwardness had faded, replaced by the quiet confidence that comes from real competence. I could drive the tractor under Grandpa's supervision, manage the chicken coop entirely on my own, and my vegetable garden plot produced enough tomatoes and cucumbers to sell at the local farmers market. School had transformed from a place of alienation to one of achievement. Math had always been my strong subject, but at Millfield Middle School I discovered I had a real talent for it. My 7th grade teacher, Mrs. Faulkner, gave me advanced problems when I finished my work early and encouraged me to join the math club. Life had found a comfortable rhythm until the summer I turned 14, when Mom, James and Tyler made their first visit in nearly 5 years. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was helping Grandma shell peas on the porch swing when the phone rang inside. Maya Grandma called from the kitchen doorway a few minutes later. "It's your mother." I wiped my hands on my shorts and took the receiver, my heart suddenly pounding. Maya Mum's voice sounded both familiar and strange. "How are you, sweetheart?" "I'm fine," I answered, unsure what else to say to this woman who had become almost a stranger. "Listen, good news, we're coming to visit this weekend. All of us, me, James and Tyler. Won't that be nice?" I gripped the phone tighter. "This weekend?" "Yes, well, drive up Friday afternoon and stay until Sunday. James has some business in Hartford on Monday, so it works out perfectly." I hung up in a daze. 3 days with the family who had effectively abandoned me. What would we even talk about? Grandma found me sitting on the back steps staring at the chicken coop. "You okay, honey?" she asked, settling beside me. "They're coming to visit," I said. "Mum, James and Tyler." Grandma nodded slowly. "I know. Your mother called me first to make sure it was all right." "Why now, after all this time?" Grandma sighed, her lined face thoughtful. "People have their reasons, Maya. Not always good ones, but reasons all the same. The question is, what do you need to make this visit okay for you?" I thought about it. I need to not pretend I decided. I won't act like everything is normal when it isn't. Grandma squeezed my hand. That's fair. Just remember, anger hurts the person carrying it most of all. When Friday came, I was a bundle of nerves. I changed my outfit 3 times, finally settling on jeans and my favorite blue t-shirt. Nothing special, nothing that looked like I was trying too hard. I pulled my long dark hair into a ponytail and stared at my reflection. At 14, I was tall for my age, with Grandpa's strong jaw and Mom's dark eyes. The sound of tires on gravel announced their arrival. A sleek SUV, much nicer than the car Mum used to drive, pulled up in front of the house. Grandma and Grandpa came to stand beside me on the porch as 3 figures emerged from the vehicle. Mum looked older, her once long hair now cut into a stylish bob with highlights. She wore designer sunglasses and clothes that looked expensive. James seemed mostly the same, though his hairline had receded somewhat. And then there was Tyler, no longer the 11-year-old boy, but a lanky 16-year-old with a permanent scowl. Mum rushed forward, arms outstretched. "Look at you, so grown up." The hug was awkward, her unfamiliar perfume overwhelming. I patted her back stiffly until she released me. "Say hello to your stepfather," Mum prompted. James gave a tight smile and a nod. "Maya, you've gotten tall." Tyler hung back, examining the farmhouse with obvious disdain. "Do people actually live like this?" he muttered, just loud enough for me to hear. Grandpa stepped forward. "Let's get your bags inside. Dinner will be ready soon." The visit was a collision of 2 worlds that refused to mesh. Mum exclaimed over how mature I had become while knowing nothing about who I actually was. She didn't know I was top of my class in math, or that I had won a blue ribbon for my strawberry jam at the county fair, or that I could name every constellation in the summer sky. Dinner was excruciating. Tyler complained about the roast chicken being too dry. James checked his phone constantly. Mum filled every silence with nervous chatter about people I didn't know and places I had never been. "Oh, and Maya," Mum said suddenly between bites of mashed potato. "You have a sister now. Emma just turned 4. She stayed with my mother this weekend so we could have quality time with you." I froze fork halfway to my mouth. "I have a sister." Half-sister, Tyler corrected with a smirk. Mum pulled out her phone to show me pictures of a smiling little girl with blonde curls. "She's just the sweetest thing. Everyone says she looks just like me." I stared at the unfamiliar child who had grown up with the mother I had lost. A sister I had never met. A sister who hadn't been sent away. The weekend crawled by in a series of uncomfortable conversations and long silences. James barely spoke to me directly, addressing most of his comments to my grandparents about the poor state of the barn's roof, or how they should consider selling the farm to developers while land prices were up. Tyler spent most of his time complaining about the lack of internet or playing games on his phone. The only genuine moment came Sunday morning when Mum found me alone in the kitchen making breakfast. "Maya," she began hesitantly, "I know things have been different than we planned." I cracked an egg into the bowl with more force than necessary. "Different," I repeated. "Is that what we call abandonment now?" Mum's face flushed. "That is not fair. We had circumstances. James' career took off. We had to relocate several times. The renovations became a full remodel, and then Emma came along. For 6 years, I whispered. You left me for 6 years and barely called." Mum looked away. "I thought you'd be happier here. Your grandparents could give you stability. James and we were building our life together, and Tyler needed special attention to adjust. And I didn't," I asked, tears threatening. "I was 9 years old, Mum." She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Before she could respond, Tyler slouched into the kitchen, complaining about the smell of the farm waking him up too early. The moment for truth had passed. When they left that afternoon, Mum hugged me tightly and promised to call more often. James gave an impersonal wave from the driver's seat. Tyler didn't bother to say goodbye at all. I stood on the porch long after their car had disappeared down the driveway, a strange hollowness in my chest. Grandpa came to stand beside me, his presence solid and comforting. "They aren't your only family, Maya," he said quietly. "Remember that." Those words became my anchor as I navigated my teenage years. While Mum did call slightly more often after that visit, our conversations remained superficial. The promised visits happened rarely, just twice more during my high school years, each time as awkward and strained as the first. But my life at the farm continued to flourish. I joined the debate team in high school and discovered I had a knack for logical arguments. My friendship with Amanda deepened into a sisterhood of sorts. We navigated the turbulent waters of high school together, first crushes, driving lessons, college applications. When I was 16, Grandpa began teaching me about the business side of the farm. He showed me the account books, explained crop rotations and market pricing, and taught me to negotiate with buyers. I learnt that a successful farm required as much brain as brawn. It's important you understand all this, Maya, he told me one evening as we calculated feed costs. This farm has been in the family for 4 generations. But wouldn't it go to Mum someday, I asked. Grandpa looked at me over his reading glasses. Susan and I have discussed it. This farm should go to someone who loves it, someone who will care for it. I felt the weight of his words, both the responsibility and the implicit acknowledgement that I had become his true heir, not just in legal terms but in spirit. By my senior year of high school, I had accumulated enough academic achievements to earn several college scholarship offers. The guidance counselor pushed for me to consider schools in Boston or New York, but I applied to the state university just 30 miles away. I couldn't imagine leaving my grandparents or the farm. Mum missed my high school graduation. She called the night before with an elaborate excuse about Emma having a dance recital the same day. I pretended it didn't hurt, but Grandma found me crying in the barn later that night. It's okay to be sad about it, Maya, she said, holding me like she had when I was 9. And it's okay to be angry too. Just don't let it define you. The day I graduated, standing on the small stage of Millfield High in my blue cap and gown, I looked out at the crowd and found my grandparents beaming with pride. Grandpa, who rarely showed emotion, wiped a tear from his eye as I accepted my diploma and the Mathematics Achievement Award. That summer before starting college, Grandma took me aside one evening. She led me to her bedroom and opened the antique jewelry box on her dresser. From inside, she removed a small velvet pouch. This was my mother's and her mother's before her, she said, opening the pouch to reveal a delicate gold locket with a small pearl set in the center. It's tradition for it to be passed down. I want you to have it now. Shouldn't it go to Mum first? I asked as she placed it around my neck. Grandma smiled gently. Some traditions are about birth order. Others are about who carries the heart of the family. You, Maya, carry our heart. As I prepared for college that fall, living at home and commuting to campus, I understood that Grandma's gift wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was confirmation that despite the circumstances of my arrival, I had truly become the daughter of the farm, the inheritor of not just land and house, but of a legacy of love and resilience. My college years began with the dual challenge of freshman classes and Grandpa's declining health. At 78, his once strong hands had grown knotted with arthritis, and his breathing became labored after even mild exertion. Despite my scholarship covering tuition, I took a weekend job at the local farmer's market to help with his medical expenses. I chose to major in finance, finding that my aptitude for mathematics translated well to the world of business and money management. The skills Grandpa had taught me about running the farm, practical applications of profit margins, inventory management, and long-term planning gave me an advantage over classmates who had only theoretical knowledge. Mum maintained her pattern of sporadic communication, mostly text messages on birthdays and holidays. She sent Christmas cards with photos of her James, Tyler, and Emma, posed in coordinating outfits, looking like the perfect family. I kept these cards in a drawer, occasionally taking them out to study the face of the half-sister I had never met. During my sophomore year, I met David in my agricultural economics elective. He was studying environmental science and had grown up on a dairy farm 2 counties over. Unlike the few other guys I had dated, David understood my commitment to my grandparents and the farm. He would often come over on weekends to help with chores, winning Grandpa's approval by knowing how to properly mend fencing and split firewood. By my junior year, Grandpa's health took a sharp decline. What began as a persistent cough was diagnosed as congestive heart failure. I rearranged my class schedule to be home more, taking some courses online when possible. Between classes, the farm, and caring for Grandpa, I barely slept. One particularly difficult evening, I was trying to study for a finance exam while sitting beside Grandpa's bed. He had been dozing most of the day, his breathing shallow. "You should be at the library, Maya," he said suddenly, his voice weaker than it had been even the day before. "I'm fine here, Grandpa," I said, reaching for his hand. "The book works the same whether I'm here or there." He gave a soft chuckle that turned into a cough. Always wear a practical one. He squeezed my hand with what little strength he had left. "I need to tell you something important." I set my textbook aside, a knot forming in my stomach at his serious tone. "This farm," he began, pausing to catch his breath. His eyes still bright despite his failing body held mine steadily. "This land has been in our family since my grandfather cleared it. Worked it with horses back then." "I know, Grandpa," I said softly. "You told me the stories. What I haven't told you," he continued, "is that your mother never wanted it. Even as a girl, she couldn't wait to leave. Nothing wrong with that. Some aren't meant for this life." He coughed again, and I helped him sip water from a straw. "But you, Maya, You have the soul of this place in you." Tears filled my eyes. I had never heard Grandpa speak so openly about Mum or about me. "When the time comes, this farm will be yours. The house, the land, all of it." He gripped my hand with sudden urgency. "Promise me you'll think hard before you ever sell it. This land isn't just dirt and trees. It's our history. It's who we are. I promise, Grandpa," I whispered, meaning it with every fibre of my being. He nodded, seemingly satisfied, then said something that shocked me. "Your mother agreed to this arrangement years ago, signed the papers when you were 12, said it was for the best." The revelation that Mom had legally formalised my separation from her, that she had signed away her inheritance rights to the farm, hit me like a physical blow. All those years of excuses and vague promises suddenly revealed as the fictions they were. Grandpa must have seen the hurt in my face because he squeezed my hand again. "Doesn't mean she doesn't love you in her way, just means she made her choice and now I made mine." 3 weeks later, on a crisp October morning during my junior year, Grandpa William passed away peacefully in his sleep. Grandma found him when she brought his morning coffee, his face serene, as if he'd simply decided it was time to rest after decades of dawn to dusk labour. The funeral was held at the small Methodist church in town. The entire community turned out farmers Grandpa had traded equipment with, for decades feed store owners, former students, from when he'd briefly taught agricultural science at the high school, and dozens of others whose lives he'd touched in his quiet way. Mum came alone. She arrived just before the service began, wearing a black dress that looked expensive and uncomfortable. She hugged me briefly, her perfume out of place among the earthy scents of the farming community. She sat beside me during the service, but seemed unsure what to do with her hands or where to look. When the minister invited people to share memories of William, she remained silent, while neighbour after neighbour stood to tell stories of his generosity and wisdom. At the small reception afterward, I overheard Mum talking to one of the distant cousins. "I really should visit more often," she was saying. "It's just been so hectic with James' career and the kids. The kids. As if I hadn't been one of them." The reading of the will took place the following week. Grandma's lawyer, Mr. Patterson, who had been handling their affairs for 30 years, came to the farmhouse. Mum attended via phone, claiming she couldn't get away from work. As Grandpa had told me, the farmhouse and all 120 acres were left to me with the provision that Grandma would have lifetime rights to live there. A small savings account would help with taxes and maintenance. Mum received some family heirlooms and a modest cash bequest. After the lawyer finished explaining everything, Mum's voice came through the speakerphone tight with what sounded like forced cheerfulness. "Well, that's lovely that Maya gets to keep the farm going. Dad would have wanted that." But her subsequent calls over the next few days revealed her true feelings. "Did you know about this arrangement?" she demanded during one late-night call. "That Dad was leaving everything to you?" "Yes," I answered honestly. "He told me before he died. He said you agreed to it years ago." There was a long pause. "Well, yes, technically, but that was when you were still a child. I thought eventually you'd come back to live with us and the farm would be sold." "When would I have come back?" Mum, I asked, surprised at how calm my voice sounded, despite the anger bubbling beneath. "When the renovations were done. When Tyler adjusted. When Emma started school. When exactly was there going to be room for me in your life again?" The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. The months after Grandpa's death were a blur of grief and responsibility. I continued my classes, helped Grandma with her own health issues, and took over the management of the farm. David was my rock during this time, driving over after his classes to help with chores, sometimes just sitting with me in comfortable silence when words couldn't breach the wall of my grief. I graduated a semester early in December rather than May, taking summer classes to speed my completion. My finance degree combined with a minor in agricultural business gave me the credentials to supplement our farm income with bookkeeping work for other local farmers. Working from the farmhouse office Grandpa had set up years ago, I could keep the farm running while building a professional reputation in the community. Grandma, despite her own grief, continued to be my emotional anchor. She shared more stories about Grandpa in those months than she had in all the years before, as if speaking about him kept him present somehow. One evening, as we sorted through old photographs in the living room, she handed me a faded picture I had never seen before. It showed a much younger Grandpa and Grandma standing in front of the farmhouse, with Mum as a teenager, all three smiling. "Your mother was so eager to leave," Grandma said, her voice gentle with memory. "She used to say the dirt from this farm would never come out from under her fingernails. She saw it as a trap, not a treasure." I studied my mother's young face in the photo, trying to reconcile that girl with the woman who had left me behind. When she met James, Grandma continued, she thought she'd found her escape into a different kind of life. Clean, modern, successful. She paused, choosing her words carefully. When they married and you came to live with us, James made it very clear that there were conditions. What do you mean conditions, I asked, though. A part of me already knew. Grandma sighed. He said the farm life had made your mother too soft, too indulgent as a parent. He wanted a fresh start to raise their family his way. She made a choice, Maya. A terrible choice that no mother should ever have to make. She chose him, I said quietly. Grandma nodded sadly. She chose the life she thought she wanted, and in doing so, she lost something precious. I don't say this to make you forgive her. That's your decision alone. I say it so you understand that sometimes people chase what they think will make them happy, only to discover they've had it all wrong. As my 20s progressed, I built a life of substance and meaning. The farm prospered under my management as I applied both the practical knowledge Grandpa had instilled and the financial principles I had learned in college. David and I grew closer, our relationship deepening into a partnership based on shared values and genuine respect. Mum remained a peripheral figure in my life, her contact limited to occasional calls and the annual Christmas card. Tyler, now in his 20s, had apparently failed at several business ventures and moved back home. Emma, the half-sister I still had never met, smiled brightly from every family photo, seemingly unaware of my existence. I had created a different kind of family for myself, one built on choice rather than blood. David, Grandma Amanda, and her husband neighbours, who had become friends, they were the people who showed up, who remained constant, who knew the real Maya. As Grandma reached her 80s, her once robust health began to falter. First came the arthritis that mirrored Grandpa's, then high blood pressure, then the early signs of heart trouble. I became for her what she and Grandpa had been for me, a caregiver, a constant presence, a promise kept. One evening, as I helped her into bed, she took my hand and placed it over her heart. Feel that, she asked. Still ticking, but not like it used to. It's getting tired, Maya. Don't talk like that, Grandma, I said, fighting the fear her words provoked. She smiled gently. It's not sad, dear one. It's the way of things. I had a wonderful life with your grandfather. I got to raise you. That's more blessing than most get in one lifetime. She patted the edge of the bed and I sat beside her. When I go, she said, you'll be alone here. That's what worries me. I'll have David, I reminded her. And the community. I'm not really alone, she nodded. Yes, you've built a good life. I'm so proud of you, Maya. You took a childhood wound, and instead of letting it poison you, you used it to grow something beautiful. I hugged her carefully, mindful of her fragile frame. What made the difference? I asked, curious about her perspective on my journey. You did, she said simply. You chose to become the kind of person who builds rather than breaks. Remember that if your mother ever comes back into your life, you don't owe her forgiveness, but don't let bitterness rob you of your peace. Those words would come back to me sooner than I expected as the winds of change and conflict gathered on the horizon of my carefully constructed life. At 27, I found myself alone in the farmhouse for the first time. Grandma Susan had passed away peacefully 3 months earlier, joining Grandpa after nearly 60 years of marriage. The double grief of losing both grandparents within a few years left me feeling untethered despite the literal rootedness of my life on the family land. The funeral had been small but meaningful, much like Grandma's life itself. Mum had attended alone again, explaining that James was on a business trip and the kids had school obligations. This time, however, she had stayed for 2 days, sleeping in her childhood bedroom that had remained largely unchanged since she left decades ago. During those 2 days, Mum and I had achieved a fragile politeness. She had helped me sort through some of Grandma's personal belongings, occasionally pausing over a particular item with a distant look in her eyes. She kept everything exactly the same, Mum had murmured, running her fingers over the embroidered dresser scarf that had been on her mother's bureau for as long as I could remember. She missed you, I said simply. This was her way of keeping you close. Mum had looked at me sharply, perhaps hearing the subtle accusation in my words, but had said nothing more about it. Before leaving, she had hugged me with surprising fierceness. I'm sorry for all of it, Maya, she had whispered against my hair. I made so many mistakes. I had stiffened in her embrace, not ready to offer the absolution she seemed to seek. Thank you for coming was all I could manage in response. After she left, I had thrown myself into work, both on the farm and my growing financial consulting business. David, now my fiancé, after a sunset proposal in Grandpa's garden, spent most weekends at the farm, but maintained his apartment closer to his environmental research job during the week. We had discussed him moving in permanently, but there was something sacred about making that transition after we were married, honouring the values my grandparents had instilled in me. Life had settled into a new rhythm when the unexpected call came from Mum on a rainy Tuesday in April. "Maya." Her voice sounded strained. "How are you?" "I'm fine." I answered the automatic response I always gave her. "Just finishing up some client work. What's up?" There was a pause, the sound of a deep breath being taken. "James and I are having some financial difficulties. Rather serious ones, actually." I sat up straighter in my office chair, suddenly alert. What kind of difficulties the investment firm James was with downsized and he was let go 3 months ago? She spoke quickly, as if getting the words out faster would make them less painful. "We've been living on savings, but he's having trouble finding something at the same level, and with the mortgage and Emma's school tuition and Tyler's debts." I'm sorry to hear that, I said, unsure what she expected from me. "Have you thought about downsizing?" Another pause, longer this time. "That's why I'm calling. We need to sell the house. The bank is starting foreclosure proceedings." My heart squeezed with unwilling sympathy. Despite everything, I couldn't take pleasure in their misfortune. "That must be very difficult." "It is." She hesitated again. "Maya, we were wondering, that is, I was thinking, could we come up this weekend to talk, all of us, something?" And her tone raised my internal alarms. "Talk about what exactly?" "Just options, family options. James has some ideas he thinks might help all of us." "Please, Maya." Against my better judgment, I agreed. David had a conference that weekend anyway, so I would be alone. Perhaps it was time to truly clear the air with my mother and the family she had chosen over me. That Saturday morning, I found myself anxiously straightening the already immaculate farmhouse. I had baked fresh bread and made a pot of beef stew more out of habit than desire to impress my visitors. Grandma's legacy of hospitality ran too deep to ignore even for guests I was wary of. The sound of a car on the gravel driveway sent my heart racing. Taking a deep breath, I stepped onto the front porch, arms crossed protectively over my chest, as a shiny black SUV pulled up. Despite their financial troubles, they still managed to maintain appearances. Mum emerged first, looking older than her 50 years. The strain of recent months showed in the tight lines around her mouth and the grey now prominently streaking her once carefully coloured hair. James followed, his posture less confident than I remembered, his designer clothes seeming slightly too loose, as if he'd lost weight rapidly. Then came Tyler, now in his early 30s, with a receding hairline and the soft middle of someone who enjoyed good living without much physical activity. The last to exit the vehicle was a teenager, with long blonde hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. Emma, I realised with a start. No longer the little girl from Christmas card photos, but a young woman of 15. She looked at the farmhouse with open curiosity rather than the disdain Tyler had always shown. Maya, Mum called, hurrying toward me with arms outstretched. "Thank you so much for having us." The hug was awkward, both of us holding back physically and emotionally. James offered a stiff handshake, Tyler a distant nod. Emma hung back, studying me with an intensity that was disconcerting. "This is your sister, Emma," Mum said, placing a hand on the girl's shoulder. "Emma, this is Maya," half-sister Tyler muttered, just as he had all those years ago. Emma ignored him, stepping forward with her hand extended. "I'm really glad to finally meet you," she said with surprising warmth. "Mum has your picture in her desk drawer." This unexpected revelation caught me off guard. I shook her hand, noting that her eyes were kind, lacking the calculation I often saw in James, or the bitterness in Tyler. "Nice to meet you too, Emma." Once inside, we gathered in the living room, the space feeling crowded after years of just me, or at most David and me, occupying it. I served coffee to the adults and offered Emma lemonade, which she accepted with a genuine smile. "This house is amazing," she said, looking around at the exposed beams and built-in bookshelves. "So much character." "It's been in the family for generations," I explained, finding it easier to talk to this previously unknown sister than to the others. The small talk continued through lunch, everyone carefully avoiding any substantive topics. Tyler complained about the lack of cell service, James made stiff comments about the quality of the stew, and Mum fluttered nervously between topics. Only Emma seemed genuinely interested in me and the farm, asking thoughtful questions about the gardens and livestock. After the meal, as I cleared dishes, James finally broached the real purpose of their visit. "Maya," he said, his voice taking on the smooth, persuasive tone I remembered from my childhood. "Your mother tells me the farm is doing well under your management." I nodded cautiously. "It supports itself, and my consulting business provides additional income, but it must be a tremendous amount of work for a young woman on her own," he continued. "And this old house, the maintenance alone must be costly." "I manage," I said simply, sensing where this was heading. James leaned forward, elbows on the table. "We've been thinking. This place has significant value, especially with land prices what they are now. Developers would pay top dollar for a parcel this size. The stiffening of my spine must have been visible because Mum quickly jumped in. What James means is that this is a family asset. With your grandparents gone, perhaps it's time to think about whether this is really the best use of the property. The best use, I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. This isn't an investment property, Mum. It's our family home. My home. Of course, James soothed. But families support each other in times of need. With our current situation and your single status, it might make sense for all of us to benefit from the value locked up in this land. Tyler, who had been sullenly staring at his phone, looked up with sudden interest. Dad has a contact at Westfield Development. They do these luxury farmhouse communities. We'd all get a cut, enough to solve all our problems. The presumption that I would sell my home, my heritage, to bail them out of their financial troubles struck me momentarily speechless. Mum must have mistaken my silence for consideration because she reached across the table to take my hand. Maya, sweetie, we could all start fresh. Maybe even be a real family again. I pulled my hand away, ice replacing the blood in my veins. A real family. After 20 years, I managed to keep my voice level despite the anger bubbling up inside me. This is my home. Grandpa and Grandma left it to me, not to all of us. James' face hardened. Your grandparents made that decision without proper legal consultation. William wasn't in his right mind toward the end. Excuse me, I stood up, unable to remain seated in the face of such an insult. Dad, Emma said sharply, her young face registering dismay. That's a terrible thing to say. James waved her off. Adults are talking, Emma. The fact is, Maya, your grandfather was suffering from cognitive decline. The will could easily be contested. On what grounds? I demanded, hands flat on the table as I leaned toward him. Grandpa was perfectly lucid until the day he died, and Mum signed legal papers agreeing to this arrangement years ago. Mum's eyes widened. How did you know about that? Grandpa told me, I said coldly. He told me everything. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Emma looked between us, all confusion evident in her expression. Tyler smirked, clearly enjoying the drama. James cleared his throat. Regardless of past arrangements, the current situation calls for family solidarity. The proceeds from selling this outdated property could help all of us. You could buy a nice modern house closer to town, invest the rest. Your mother and I could resolve our financial issues. Tyler could finally get his business off the ground. Everyone wins. Not me, I said firmly. I don't win by giving up my home and heritage. This farm has been in our family for 4 generations. I'm not selling it. The mask of civility dropped from James' face, revealing the calculation beneath. Listen, Maya, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. I have friends in the county records office who can help us challenge the will. Do you really want a protracted legal battle? I stared at him in disbelief. Are you threatening me? Just being practical, he replied with a tight smile. You always were a practical girl. I think you should leave, I said, my voice steady, despite the rage coursing through me. Mum stood up, distress plain on her face. Maya, please. James didn't mean it like that. We're just desperate. Maybe we could take some time to discuss options. There are no options to discuss, I stated firmly. This is my home. I am not selling it. Not now, not ever. Selfish, just like your grandfather, James muttered, rising to his feet. Tyler stood as well, his face twisted with resentment. Always thought you were better than us, didn't you, living on this precious family land, while the rest of us had to work for everything. Work, I laughed incredulously. When have you ever worked, Tyler? From what Mum tells me, you've failed at every business venture you've tried, and now you're living off your parents again. Tyler lunged forward, but Emma stepped between us, her young face fierce with unexpected courage. Stop it, all of you. This is horrible. Her intervention created a moment of shocked silence. In that pause, I gathered my composure. I want you all to leave, I repeated. Now. James grabbed his jacket from the back of the chair. Come on, Susan. She's made her position clear. Mum hesitated, looking torn between her husband and her firstborn daughter. Maya, please reconsider. We could work something out. Maybe just sell part of the land. I shook my head. This isn't a negotiation. Please go. As they gathered their things, Emma approached me quietly. I'm sorry, she said, her voice low. I didn't know this was why they wanted to visit you. The sincerity in her eyes made my anger falter. It's not your fault. Can I maybe write to you sometime? She asked hesitantly. I always wanted to know my big sister. Despite everything, I found myself nodding. I'd like that, Emma. As they filed out to the car, James turned on the porch steps, his expression cold. "This isn't over, Maya. Family property should benefit the whole family. Expect to hear from our lawyer." I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching them drive away. Only when the dust from their car had settled did I allow myself to sink onto the porch steps, trembling with rage and disbelief. The peaceful life I had built was now under threat from the very people who had abandoned me 2 decades before. But as the initial shock faded, another emotion took its place: resolve. This farm had taught me about resilience, about fighting for what matters. And I would fight with everything I had to protect my home and the legacy my grandparents had entrusted to me. The first legal notice arrived 3 weeks after their visit. It was delivered by courier, a thick envelope containing a formal challenge to Grandpa's will, citing diminished capacity and undue influence. The document was full of legalese, but its essence was clear. James and my mother were claiming that Grandpa had not been mentally competent when he made his will, and that Grandma had manipulated him into leaving everything to me instead of my mother. My hands shook as I read the accusations against my beloved grandparents. The lawyer who had prepared these documents had clearly never met Grandpa, who had remained sharp as a tack until his final days, or Grandma, whose ethical compass had always pointed true north. The claims were not just false, they were a desecration of their memory. I called David immediately, my voice tight with suppressed rage as I explained the situation. "This is insane, Maya," he said after I finished. "They can't possibly win this." "They might not need to win," I realized aloud. "This is a pressure tactic. They want to drain my resources and wear me down until I agree to sell just to make it stop." That night, I barely slept, my mind racing with worries. I knew the farm inside and out, but the labyrinth of legal proceedings was unfamiliar territory. The modest savings Grandpa had left would quickly be devoured by legal fees if this turned into a protracted battle. The next morning, I called Amanda, who had become a paralegal at a law firm in Hartford. She listened to my situation with growing outrage. "Maya, you need to talk to Sarah Patel at our firm. She specializes in estate litigation. I'll set up a meeting for tomorrow." Sarah turned out to be a diminutive woman in her 40s, with a take-no-prisoners attitude that was immediately reassuring. After reviewing the documents, she leaned back in her chair, expression thoughtful. "This is a nuisance case," she said bluntly. "Based on what you've told me about your grandparents and the circumstances, there's very little merit to their claims. But they know that litigation is expensive and stressful, and they're counting on that to force a settlement." "What do we do?" I asked. "Fight back. Hard." Sarah picked up a pen and began making notes. "First, we gather evidence of your grandfather's mental competence. Medical records witness statements from community members who interacted with him regularly. Then we address the undue influence claim by documenting the history your mother had effectively abandoned you with your grandparents for nearly 2 decades with minimal contact." She looked up at me, her eyes kind despite her tough demeanor. "This won't be easy, Maya. They'll drag your family history into the public record. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about my grandparents, about the love and values they had instilled in me. "Yes," I said firmly. "The truth is on my side. I'm not ashamed of my history." Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into building our case. I contacted Grandpa's doctor, who provided a sworn statement about his mental clarity. I found neighbours and community members willing to attest to their interactions with him right up until his death. The pastor at the local church contributed a statement about Grandpa's active participation in church business meetings. But my most powerful evidence came from an unexpected source. While searching through Grandpa's office for any documents that might help our case, I discovered a leather-bound journal in the bottom drawer of his desk. Inside, in his precise handwriting, were dated entries spanning the last 5 years of his life, a record of farm operations, weather patterns, and most importantly, his thoughts about the future of the farm. October 15th, 2019. Talked with Susan about the will again. We both agree Maya is the right choice. This farm needs someone who loves it, who understands what it means beyond just land and buildings. Susan showed me the papers from when Maya was 12. Susan signed over guardianship permanently, then though she never told Maya, said it would be too hard. Strange how some can't see what they throw away until it's gone. The entry confirmed what Grandpa had told me about Mum signing papers, but with a detail I hadn't known: it had been a full transfer of guardianship, not just an arrangement about the farm inheritance. The realization that Mum had legally severed her parental rights hit me with unexpected force. All those years of vague promises about coming back had been absolute lies. As I continued reading, I found more entries that documented Grandpa's clear thinking and deliberate planning. March 3rd, 2020, Maya showed me her business plan for expanding the berry operation. Sharp girl, sees opportunities I would have missed. Got her mother's looks, but none of her restlessness, thank the Lord. Decided today to update the will, make everything crystal clear. No room for misunderstandings later. The journal was a treasure trove for our case, showing not only Grandpa's mental acuity, but also his careful consideration of the farm's future. Sarah was ecstatic when I brought it to her office. "This is gold, Maya," she said carefully, turning the pages. His own words dated entries, showing his decision-making process. And look here, he even mentions consulting with the lawyer about how to make the will challenge-proof. While we built our legal defense, the pressure from my mother's side intensified. James began calling local farmers who did business with me, suggesting that the farm's ownership was in dispute and that they might want to reconsider their arrangements. Mum tried a different approach, sending tearful emails about family reconciliation while simultaneously supporting James' legal maneuvers. The most painful development came when distant family members began taking sides. Cousins I barely knew called to ask why I was being so selfish. My mother's sister, Aunt Carol, who had visited only occasionally when I was growing up, left a scathing voicemail accusing me of elder abuse and manipulation. Only Emma remained a bright spot in the darkness. True to her word, she began writing to me real letters on floral stationery, telling me about her school, her friends, her dreams of becoming a veterinarian. She never mentioned the legal battle directly, but between the lines, I could read her discomfort with the situation. In one letter, she included a small sketch she had done of the farmhouse, from a photo with a note saying I hope to visit again someday under better circumstances. As the court date approached, my stress levels soared. Despite Sarah's confidence in our case, I knew that legal proceedings were unpredictable. One night, after reviewing documents until my eyes burned, I found myself sitting on the porch swing where Grandma and I had spent so many evenings. "I miss you both so much," I whispered into the night air. "I wish you were here to tell me what to do." A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the old oak tree Grandpa had planted the year he and Grandma were married. In that moment, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. My grandparents might be gone, but their strength lived on in me in the skills and values they had instilled. I would not be intimidated or bullied out of my home. The court hearing took place on a sweltering August day. I dressed conservatively in a navy blue dress Grandma had helped me pick out for job interviews. My hair pulled back in a neat bun. David sat directly behind me in the courtroom, his solid presence a comfort. Mom, James and Tyler sat across the aisle with their lawyer, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit. Mum kept trying to catch my eye, but I focused straight ahead, mentally reviewing the key points Sarah and I had prepared. The proceedings began with their lawyer presenting their case. He painted a picture of a confused old man manipulated by his wife and granddaughter of a daughter cruelly denied her birthright of a family farm that should rightfully benefit all members of the family. He spoke of Mum's deep connection to her childhood home, conveniently ignoring her decades-long absence from it. When it was our turn, Sarah methodically dismantled their narrative. She presented the medical evidence of Grandpa's mental competence. She called witnesses, including Grandpa's doctor, his pastor, and 3 longtime neighbours, who testified to his sharp mind and deliberate decision-making. Then she presented the journal-reading key entries that demonstrated not only Grandpa's clarity, but his awareness that his decisions might be challenged. The judge examined the journal carefully, paying particular attention to the entries that mentioned consulting with his lawyer, specifically to ensure the will would withstand challenges. But Sarah's masterstroke came when she presented the guardianship documents Mum had signed when I was 12. The legal papers clearly stated that she was permanently transferring guardianship to my grandparents, effectively relinquishing her parental rights and any claim to the farm through inheritance. When it was Mum's turn to testify, she crumbled under Sarah's questioning. Her claims about maintaining a close relationship with her parents were exposed as fiction by phone records showing only sporadic contact. Her insistence that she had always intended for me to return to her home fell apart when confronted with the guardianship documents bearing her signature. "Did you or did you not sign these papers in 2007? Mrs. Thompson," Sarah asked, her voice firm but not unkind. Yes, but James said it was just a formality," Mum stammered, glancing nervously at her husband. "For school enrollment and medical decisions." Sarah pointed to specific language in the document. "This clause explicitly states that you are permanently transferring both physical and legal custody to William and Susan Carter." It further states that you were waiving all inheritance rights to the Carter family farm in exchange for a cash settlement of $15,000. Did you understand what you were signing? Mum looked down at her hands. James said it was temporary. He said once we were more established, once Tyler adjusted. James' face had gone rigid with anger, while Tyler slouched in his seat scrolling through his phone, as if bored by the whole proceeding. After a brief recess, the judge returned with his decision. His expression was stern as he addressed the courtroom. Having reviewed all evidence presented, I find no merit whatsoever in the plaintiff's claims. William Carter's will was properly executed while he was of sound mind. Furthermore, the guardianship agreement signed by Susan Thompson in 2007 clearly waived any claim she might have had to the property in question. He looked directly at James. This court does not look kindly on frivolous challenges designed to intimidate or harass. This case is dismissed. Ms. Carter is awarded attorney fees to be paid by the plaintiffs. The relief that flooded through me was so intense I nearly collapsed. David was instantly by my side, his arm around my waist providing support. Outside the courtroom, Mum approached me, her face tear-streaked and crumpled. "Maya, I'm so sorry," she began. "James convinced me we had a case. He said it was the only way to solve our financial problems." I looked at her mother, who had given birth to me but had never truly been a parent. In her face, I could see echoes of my own features alongside the marks left by years of choices she now seemed to regret. "Mum," I said quietly, "I don't hate you, but I don't trust you either. You chose James and Tyler over me when I was a child who needed you. You signed away your rights to be my mother, and now you tried to take away the only real home I've ever known." She flinched at my words but didn't deny them. "Maya, I know I've made terrible mistakes, but I'm still your mother. Could we perhaps start over, try to build some kind of relationship?" I thought about Grandma's words about not letting bitterness rob me of peace. "I can't say yes to that right now," I told her honestly, "but I can't say never either. I need time and space, and I need you to respect my boundaries, starting with my home." She nodded, wiping away tears. "Will you at least stay in touch with Emma? She's the innocent one in all this. She adores you, you know, always asking about her big sister." The thought of my half-sister so different from the rest of them brought a small smile to my face. "Yes, Emma and I will continue to write to each other." James and Tyler were already in the car, James' face thunderous with defeat. As Mum turned to join them, she paused. "The house looks good, Maya. Dad and Mum would be proud of how you've kept it up." It was the closest thing to a genuine compliment she had given me in years. "Thank you," I said simply. As they drove away, David squeezed my hand. "You okay?" I watched the car disappear down the road, much as I had watched them leave after their initial visit. But this time, instead of shock and anger, I felt something different. A sense of closure of a chapter finally ending. "I'm getting there," I answered truthfully. "Let's go home." Standing on the front porch of my farmhouse a year after the court battle, I breathed in the sweet scent of September air. The berry bushes Grandpa and I had planted years ago were heavy with fruit, and the vegetable garden Grandma had taught me to tend was yielding its full harvest. Every inch of this place held memories and meaning, a tangible connection to the people who had loved me unconditionally. The legal victory had been definitive. James and my mother had paid my legal fees as ordered by the court, though I heard through Emma that it had strained their already precarious finances. They had eventually been forced to sell their house and move into a modest rental. Tyler had relocated to another state for a job his grand business plans abandoned. Emma wrote that she was thankful for the smaller house and the public school she now attended, where she had found friends who liked her for herself, not her family's former status. My relationship with Emma had flourished through our letters and occasional video calls. At 16, she possessed a wisdom beyond her years, perhaps forged in the crucible of our family's dysfunction. She had visited the farm twice during school breaks, her mother driving her up and leaving her with me for a few days each time. During those visits, we had discovered shared interests in gardening and animals, a common thread that connected us despite our different upbringings. As for Mum, our relationship remained complicated. After the court case, she had made sporadic attempts to reconnect, sending birthday cards and occasional texts. I responded politely but maintained firm boundaries. The wounds of childhood abandonment had scarred over but would never fully disappear. Still, I had come to understand that holding on to anger only hurt me in the end. I could acknowledge what had happened without letting it poison my present. David moved into the farmhouse after we married in a simple ceremony held in Grandpa's garden. We had expanded the small consulting business I had started, combining his environmental expertise with my financial knowledge to create a firm specializing in sustainable agriculture planning. Working from the farmhouse office, we helped local farmers maximize their profits while protecting the land they loved, a mission that would have made Grandpa proud. In honor of my grandparents, I had started a community garden program on a corner of the property, inviting local families to grow their own food and learn the skills Grandpa had taught me. The Sunset Years. Garden Club, I called it, with a special section where senior citizens mentored children from the local schools. The intergenerational connections formed there were healing in ways I hadn't anticipated, creating a living legacy that extended beyond bloodlines. Life wasn't perfect. The old farmhouse required constant maintenance, and balancing the demands of the farm with our growing business sometimes left me exhausted. There were days when memories of the past rose up like ghosts, bringing waves of sadness for what might have been if my mother had made different choices. But those moments no longer defined me. One evening, as David and I sat on the porch swing, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, he put his arm around me and pulled me close. "Penny for your thoughts," he said softly. "I was just thinking about family," I replied, leaning into his warmth. "About how we get to choose what kind of family we create, regardless of what we were born into." He nodded, understanding as always. "You know, when your mum and James showed up demanding the farm, I was worried about what it would do to you. Dredging up all that old pain. It did hurt," I acknowledged. "But it also forced me to finally face everything head-on, to stop waiting for a mother who was never coming back, and to fully claim this place and this life as mine, by choice, not just by inheritance." As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. The 9-year-old girl sent away from home had found a truer home, and built a life filled with purpose and love. The grandparents who had taken me in had given me far more than a house and land. They had shown me what real family meant, through their unwavering support and quiet wisdom. I had learned that sometimes the deepest wounds can become sources of strength. That forgiveness isn't about excusing the past, but refusing to let it dictate the future. That home isn't just a place, but a feeling of belonging that you carry within yourself and share with those you choose to love. The farm would continue. Perhaps someday children of our own would run through its fields and learn the lessons of the land. The legacy of hard work, integrity, and resilience would live on not just in the property deeds and legal documents, but in the values passed down through generations. As darkness settled over the farm, I felt a profound sense of peace. This place, this life I had fought for and won, was exactly where I was meant to be. And in the soft whisper of wind through the old oak trees, I could almost hear Grandma and Grandpa's voices telling me they had known it all along. If you've ever had to fight for what truly belongs to you, or if you've had to create your own definition of family, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Remember that sometimes losing what you thought you needed leads to finding what truly matters. Please like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe to hear more stories of resilience, and share with someone who might need a reminder that it's never too late to claim your rightful place in the world. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, your legacy isn't just what you're given, it's what you choose to build with your own hands and heart.